Well, Dr Stefan Auer is the Jean Monnet Chair in EU Interdisciplinary Studies and a senior lecturer in history and politics at La Trobe University. He spoke with me earlier from Melbourne. Dr Stefan Auer, thanks for talking to the world. In the past 24 hours, we've seen France and Germany calling for a new European treaty, basically a legally binding pact that would see more centralised control placed on the national budgets of member states. Two questions then. One, could that avert the economic meltdown that everyone fears? And two, is it likely to happen in your view?
Well, it depends whether the treaty would be adopted, and that is a big if, because any treaty change in the European Union usually takes years. You know, the last treaty, the current treaty that was adopted in 2009, the Lisbon Treaty, it took 10 years to ratify it. There were two referenda, for example, in Ireland, where the first attempt failed. In fact, the treaty was preceded by another failed treaty, the constitutional treaty. Maybe what they have in mind is less ambitious than that, and in that case, maybe it can be implemented faster than that. But Olli Rehn, an EU economic commissioner, said that the Eurozone has 10 days to save itself, and I don't think that a major treaty change would take only 10 days.
Well, core to the plan is a bigger role for the European Central Bank, a role that would see it become lender of last resort for financially delinquent states like Greece. Will Germany in particular accept that kind of solution?
I just can't see that happening. And you mentioned in the introduction that both France and Germany are instrumental in any major change. Mind you, other 17 member states of the Eurozone, or in fact 27 members of the EU, would have to accept it too. But even France and Germany are not singing from the same hymn sheet, if you want, because what France envisages is a more interventionist role for the European Central Bank, which is completely opposed to the German tradition and completely opposed also to openly pronounced policies that Germany stands for. Just today, there was an article published in the Australian newspaper by the German Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle, who was very clear about the German position on that, and that is Germany objects to any role for the European Central Bank in printing money and easing the debt crisis simply through monetary easing.
Is it fair to say that Germany's objection to the European Central Bank becoming the lender of last resort essentially removes the incentive for indebted countries to reform their economies?
Well, that is one major problem, but it goes beyond that. I mean, the fear in Germany of inflation is very deeply rooted. It goes back to the experience of a failed Weimar Republic that led to, well, catastrophes in Europe, the Nazi takeover, etc. So in German psyche, the threat of inflation is huge. But Mr. Westerwelle, the German foreign minister, pointed out that this is not just in German interest. It is in no one's interest for the currency to become inflationary, to get out of control. And you see, with policies of monetary easing, inflation wouldn't hit in, say, immediately, but that is something that would haunt Europe then for years to come. I just cannot envisage a situation in which Germany would accept such a role for the European Central Bank. If that happens, then there will be a massive backlash, also electoral backlash in Germany.
Okay, European leaders will meet next week in what's being pitched as a make or break EU summit in Brussels. How optimistic are you that they'll be able to find a course through this current crisis?
Well, this is the fourth summit this year that is, presented as a summit to end all summits, as that summit that will find the final solution to this crisis. I don't think it is going to happen. I think that the European politicians, the EU elites, have wasted 18 months since the crisis erupted with the sovereign debt crisis in Greece, and I'm very pessimistic about what can be achieved. The best that might come out of it is some kind of political commitment that might pacify markets for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, but the underlying problems that we haven't even discussed, the huge discrepancies in competitiveness between the economies that are under the straitjacket of the Eurozone. These problems cannot be resolved through a summit.
So given the urgency...
Or a new treaty.
Yeah, okay. Given the urgency of this crisis, Stefan Auer, the need for bold action to find the necessary political solution to Europe's problems, you're saying that simply isn't achievable in the time frame that's available.
It's not achievable, but to be perfectly frank with you, I don't even believe that it's desirable. What does it mean, a bold action? I mean, people who are still talking in favor of an ever closer union, and even Sarkozy's speech has elements of that, and Merkel's speech, talk about the need for something that would resemble more a United States of Europe. I don't think that is desirable for Europeans, because the peoples of Europe do not want it. So it's not doable, but I don't even think it's desirable. What would be desirable is to look at the situation through a realistic perspective and acknowledge that the common currency is a failed project, and to focus the energy on maintaining the unity of Europe, even if the common currency might have to be sacrificed, at least in its current form. It's just inconceivable that Greece would remain in the Eurozone for much longer. It's also hard to imagine how Spain and Portugal can remain with it. So I think a more realistic assessment would help, and strategies should be developed to deal with the situation that will ensue once the common currency starts disintegrating, because the real threat is that it really would also lead to the disintegration of the European Union.
Okay, well, if we are seeing the end of the Eurozone, is that why we're hearing people like the Bank of England Governor Mervyn King urging banks to stockpile money, batten down the hatches in essence?
Well, yes, I mean, this is a very significant statement, isn't it? Because until recently, I mean, most responsible banks would have had developed scenarios along those lines anyway. But for a public figure to make a public statement of this kind, it does tell you about the urgency of the situation. And as I mentioned, I mean, even Olli Rehn, who is EU Commissioner, stated that the days for the Eurozone, well, the days for a viable solution are very few. There are very few days left for a viable solution.
Okay, Dr. Stefan Auer, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for talking to The World.